The alarm started screaming at 0300 hours, which was, universally speaking, the worst possible time for anything to go wrong. Throckmall jolted awake in his quarters, all 6 of his limbs flailing in different directions like a particularly aggressive windmill, and immediately knew someone was about to have a very bad morning. That someone, he suspected with the paranoia that had kept him alive through 15 military campaigns, was probably him. Security breach. Xenofauna nursery wing. Motion sensors triggered. All units respond immediately. The station's AI had that particular pitch of panic that suggested things were, in the technical parlance of crisis management, completely and utterly screwed. Throckmall was already moving, his forelegs carrying his massive frame down the corridor, while his upper arms checked his plasma rifle and his middle arms. Well, they were trying to fasten his armor plating. But he'd been asleep exactly 9 minutes, and his fine motor control hadn't quite caught up with his adrenaline. He looked, objectively speaking, like an idiot. He felt, subjectively speaking, like an idiot who was about to shoot something. The Xenofauna nursery wing was the most secure location on Pinnacle Haven, which was itself one of the most secure conservation stations in the entire Galactic Union. You didn't just wander into the nursery. You didn't accidentally trip into the nursery. You needed 6 levels of biometric clearance, 3 separate authorization codes, and a very good reason for why you weren't minding your own business literally anywhere else. So if someone, or something, had triggered the motion sensors, they'd done it on purpose, and that meant smugglers, saboteurs, or the kind of idiot who thought stealing the galaxy's most endangered species would be a fun weekend activity. Throckmall rounded the corner at a speed that would have been impressive if he hadn't immediately collided with Lix, his second-in-command, who had apparently had the same idea about response time and considerably better luck with corners. "Watch it!" Lix hissed, her serpentine body coiling defensively, thermal pits flaring as she scanned for threats. Her scales rippled with bioluminescent irritation. She did not appreciate being crashed into, even by her commanding officer. "Motion sensors?" Throckmall grunted, recovering his dignity and his rifle. 3 separate triggers, Lix confirmed, slithering forward with her weapon raised. All in the quarantine section. High-value targets. High-value targets. That was military speak for the baby animals worth more than your entire genetic lineage. They reached the nursery entrance, where 4 more guards had already assembled, looking alert, terrified, and like they desperately wished they'd chosen literally any other career path. The doors hissed open, revealing the sprawling facility beyond. Rows of environmentally controlled habitats, each one carefully calibrated for the specific needs of whatever traumatized, orphaned, or nearly extinct creature currently called it home. The lights were on emergency mode, bathing everything in that particular shade of red that made everyone look either sinister or mildly nauseous. "Spread out," Throckmall ordered, his voice dropping to a growl. "Check every habitat, every corner, every shadow. If something moved, I want to know what, where, and why it thought that was a good idea." The guards fanned out with practiced precision, their various appendages, sensory organs, and weapons sweeping the space. Lix moved like liquid through the rows, her thermal vision picking up the heat signatures of sleeping animals. The Krillian serpent in Habitat 6, the Vexon bird in Habitat 11, the juvenile megapredator from Ixion 6 that was, thankfully, still exactly where it was supposed to be. Everything seemed fine. Too fine. Suspiciously fine. "Commander Throckmall," one of the younger guards called out, his voice cracking slightly. He was a Kixian, all nervous energy and wobbling antennae. The Kethrian cubs? They're not in their habitat. Time, Throckmall noticed, had a funny way of slowing down right before everything went to hell. The Kethrian tiger cubs, 3 of them. The last 3 in the entire known universe. Each one worth more than a small moon, not in currency, but in sheer irreplaceable biological significance. They were supposed to be in a triple-sealed habitat with climate control, psionic dampeners, and enough monitoring equipment to track every breath they took. They were, apparently, not there. "Lock down the station," Throckmall said, and his voice had gone very, very quiet, which anyone who knew him understood was significantly worse than yelling. "Lock down everything. Seal every bay, every corridor, every air duct large enough to fit a cub. Nobody leaves. Nothing leaves." Lix was already moving, her portable scanner out and tracking. "I've got psionic signatures," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Faint, but present. They're moving? No, wait. They're stationary. That direction." She pointed with her tail toward the personnel wing. The personnel wing, where the staff quarters were located, where someone, some absolute fool, had apparently decided to commit the single dumbest act of theft in galactic history. Throckmall's 4 legs carried him forward at a pace that could generously be described as furious stampede. Lix kept pace beside him, her scanner beeping with increasing frequency as they closed in on the signal. They passed through the rec area, empty, and into the rest quarters corridor. The psionic signature was getting stronger. Lix's scanner was practically screaming now, which meant the cubs were close, which meant whoever had taken them was about to experience the full weight of Earthanian justice, which was historically quite heavy and involved a lot of shouting. "There," Lix whispered, pointing at one of the doors. It was slightly ajar, warm light, spilling into the hallway. The nameplate read, "Hux, Wildlife Handler." Oh, of course. Of course it was the human. Throckmall had worked with exactly 3 humans in his 30-cycle career, and all 3 of them had been varying degrees of insane. Humans were, well, they were effective, he'd give them that. But they were also unpredictable, insufficiently paranoid, and had a disturbing tendency to treat dangerous situations like minor inconveniences. He pushed the door open slowly, rifle raised, ready for anything: smuggling operation, hostage situation, elaborate escape plan. What he found was none of those things. What he found was Hux, the station's human wildlife handler, asleep on the small couch in his quarters. The human was sprawled in that boneless way humans slept when they were truly exhausted, one arm dangling off the edge, mouth slightly open, making a soft snoring sound that would have been comical under literally any other circumstances. He was wearing an oversized hoodie. Humans were obsessed with these garments, apparently, some sort of comfort thing related to their tragically under-insulated bodies, dark blue with some faded logo on it. And the hoodie's front pocket was moving. Throckmall approached slowly, Lix right behind him, both of them staring at the pocket like it might explode. Which, given the contents, it very well might. 3 small, furry faces peeked out from the pocket opening. Bioluminescent stripes glowed softly in the dim light. 6 eyes, 2 per cub, blinked sleepily up at the guards. The Kethrian tiger cubs, all 3 of them, curled up in the human's hoodie pocket like it was the most natural thing in the universe. And they were purring? Throckmall stared. Lix stared. The cubs stared back, made a soft chirping sound, and then burrowed deeper into the pocket, clearly annoyed at being disturbed. "What?" Throckmall said slowly, "in the name of every star in the void, is happening right now?" Lix lowered her weapon, her expression cycling through confusion, disbelief, and what might have been reluctant amusement. "I think," she said carefully, "the human fell asleep with the cubs." "That is illegal," Throckmall said, still staring. "Yes." "That is a massive security breach." "Yes." "That is a violation of approximately 15 different quarantine protocols." "Also, yes. Those cubs are worth more than this entire station." "Correct. And they are napping in his pocket." "That does appear to be the situation, yes." One of the cubs yawned, showing tiny needle-sharp teeth, then settled back against its siblings. The purring intensified. Hux shifted slightly in his sleep, his hand unconsciously moving to rest against the pocket, and the cubs immediately calmed, their bioluminescent stripes dimming to a soft, contented glow. Throckmall holstered his rifle. This was, he decided, a problem for someone with significantly more patience and significantly fewer weapons. "Get Commander Uxloth," he said, wearily, "and tell them to bring, I don't know, regulations, common sense, a very strong sedative?" "For the cubs or for us?" Lix asked. "Yes," Throckmall said, and he'd never meant anything more sincerely in his entire life. Commander Uxloth arrived within 6 minutes, which was impressive considering they had to physically manifest from their rest state. Crystalline beings didn't sleep so much as enter low-power mode, and interrupting that process was, according to Uxloth's many complaints over the cycles, profoundly disorienting and unnecessarily dramatic. They materialized in the doorway as a formation of floating geometric crystals that gradually cohered into a vaguely humanoid shape, all sharp angles and refracted light. Their internal luminescence was pulsing an annoyed shade of orange. "This had better be," Uxloth began, then stopped, their crystalline eyes focusing on the scene before them. "Oh, for the love of... Is that human sleeping with the cubs?" "In his pocket, specifically," Throckmall clarified, because apparently this situation needed more absurd details. Uxloth's color shifted to a deeper orange, bordering on red. In crystalline emotional language, this was approximately equivalent to a migraine. "Wake him up!" Lix moved forward and gently, very gently, because disturbing the cubs seemed like a bad idea, nudged Hux's shoulder. "Hey, human, wake up!" Hux made a sound that might have been a word in some human language, but was more likely just sleepy protest. His eyes cracked open, unfocused and confused. "What time is it?" "Time for you to explain," Uxloth said, their voice resonating with that particular crystalline harmonics that meant serious business. "Why the 3 most valuable organisms on this station are currently residing in your clothing." Hux blinked, looked down at his hoodie pocket, looked at the 3 pairs of glowing eyes peering up at him, looked back at the assembled guards and his commanding officer. "Oh," he said, with the kind of calm that suggested his brain hadn't fully rebooted yet. "Yeah, that." "Yes, that," Throckmall said, his patience finally snapping. "Explain that." The cubs, startled by the sudden volume, made distressed chirping sounds. Hux immediately placed his hand over the pocket, making soft shushing noises, and the cubs settled again. "Don't yell," Hux said, still groggy. "You're scaring them." Throckmall looked at Uxloth. Uxloth looked at Throckmall. Lix looked at both of them and decided that this was, somehow, her problem now. "Hux," she said, keeping her voice level, "why are the cubs in your pocket?" "They were cold," Hux said, like this explained everything. Which, to be fair, to a human, it probably did. The impromptu interrogation took place in the conference room adjacent to the nursery, because Uxloth had decided, with admirable restraint, considering, that conducting official business in a sleeping human's quarters, while 3 endangered cubs napped in his pocket, was beneath the dignity of this station's command structure. Hux sat at the table, still wearing the hoodie, still with 3 lumps visible in the front pocket. He'd been offered coffee. Humans ran on the stuff, apparently, some sort of chemical dependency they'd turned into a cultural institution, and was now cradling a mug that read, "Galaxies okayest handler," in faded letters. Throckmall stood at parade rest near the door, all 6 arms crossed in various configurations of disapproval. Lix had coiled herself into a chair, her thermal vision occasionally flickering over the cubs to monitor their vital signs. And Oxloth had positioned themselves at the head of the table, their crystalline form pulsing a steady, authoritative blue. "Let me be certain I understand the sequence of events," Oxloth began, their voice carrying that carefully controlled tone that suggested they were 3 seconds from shattering something. "You removed 3 critically endangered, telepathic, recently traumatized cubs from their quarantine habitat, a habitat equipped with climate control, medical monitoring, and approximately 800,000 credits worth of enrichment equipment, because they were, and I quote, cold." "Well, yeah," Hux said, taking a sip of coffee. "They were shivering." "They have fur," Throckmall interjected, his volume control apparently still broken. "Thick fur, evolutionary adaptation for their native climate. They are designed to regulate temperature." One of the cubs poked its head out of the pocket, chirped indignantly at Throckmall, then disappeared back inside. "Okay, first of all," Hux said, pointing at Throckmall with his coffee mug, "you really need to work on your inside voice. Second, yeah, they have fur, but they'd just come from medical examination. And Dr. Fixelo keeps that lab at what, 16 degrees? For their comfort?" He gestured vaguely at the commander. "These cubs are babies. They just lost their mother. They're stressed, they're scared, and they were cold. So I violated protocol," Oxaloth finished. "Removed them from quarantine. Took them to your personal quarters." "I mean, when you say it like that, it sounds bad." "Because it is bad," Throckmall said. "Dude, seriously, the yelling." "Throckmall," Lix said quietly. "Perhaps lower your volume. The cubs are responding to stress markers in your voice." Throckmall's mandibles clicked in frustration, but he did lower his volume. Slightly. "Explain the rest." Hux shrugged, which caused a small earthquake of movement in his pocket and resulted in 3 sleepy chirps of protest. "Not much to explain. I finished the feeding rotation around 0200. Yeah, I know. I was running late. Equipment malfunction in Habitat 12. And when I got to the cubs, they were huddled together, making these little distressed sounds. Not the telepathic screaming they usually do, just sad noises." "Sad noises," Uxloth repeated flatly. "Yeah, like, okay, you know, when a baby cries, but it's not an angry cry, it's that tired, miserable, everything is wrong cry. I am a crystalline being who reproduces through lattice division," Uxaloth said. "I do not, in fact, know that." "Right, sorry. Anyway, they were cold. I could feel it when I checked on them. And they kept trying to burrow under the thermal blanket. But it wasn't helping because thermal blankets don't have, warmth in the right way. They're not alive." Lix's head tilted slightly. "Not alive?" "Yeah. I mean, humans, we're warm-blooded, right? We put out heat constantly, and our hearts beat in this specific rhythm, and we breathe, and all that biological stuff creates this, I don't know, presence? These cubs, they're pack animals. They're used to sleeping in a pile with their family, feeling heartbeats, body heat, the whole thing. A thermal blanket is just fabric. It's not comfort." There was a moment of silence in the room, the kind of silence that suggested everyone was processing information they didn't particularly want to believe. "So, your solution," Oxaloth said slowly, "was to become a surrogate heat source?" "I mean, I just held them for a minute to warm them up," Hux said defensively. "That was the plan. But then they started purring. Did you know they purr? It's the cutest thing, this little vibration that sounds like a tiny engine. And they kind of snuggled in, and their telepathic distress signals stopped. Like, completely stopped. For the first time since we rescued them." Lix's scanner, which had been monitoring the cubs this entire time, beeped softly. She glanced at the readout, her expression shifting to something between surprise and concern. "He's right. Their stress hormones are at baseline. Cortisol levels are normal. Heart rates are... Actually, they're better than normal. These readings are consistent with deep, restful sleep." "How long have they been asleep?" Uxloth asked. Hux checked the chronometer on the wall. 4 hours? Maybe 5? 5 hours? Throckmal's volume control had officially given up. "You fell asleep for 5 hours with unauthorized fauna in your quarters, and nobody noticed?" "Well, I set an alarm, but I guess I turned it off," Hux admitted. "In my defense, I was really tired. The cubs were warm, they were happy, and honestly, I haven't slept that well in weeks. Turns out having tiny purring tiger things on your chest is incredibly relaxing." Oxaloth's internal light flickered between colors, unable to settle on an appropriate emotional response. Let me understand this completely. You brought the cubs to your quarters. You intended to warm them for a few minutes. They fell asleep. You fell asleep. And now, 5 hours later, we have a station-wide security breach, a quarantine violation, and approximately 6,000 regulations that have been broken, all because you thought they needed a hug? I mean, it wasn't a hug exactly. More like shared body heat with emotional support. "That is a hug," Lix said. "You're describing a hug." "Okay, fine. Yes, I hugged the endangered space tigers, guilty as charged." One of the cubs shifted in the pocket, stretched with a tiny yawn that showed all its teeth, and then settled back down. Its bioluminescent stripes pulsed in a slow, contented rhythm. Throckmal stared at the cub, then at Hux, then at Uxloth. "Commander, permission to speak freely?" "Granted," Uxloth said wearily. "I have been in security for 30 cycles. I have dealt with smugglers, pirates, rogue AI, and one particularly aggressive sentient fungus. And this," he gestured at Hux and the pocket full of cubs, "this is the stupidest thing I have ever encountered." "Thank you for that assessment," Uxloth said. "Now, the question becomes, what do we do about it?" "Reprimand him," Throckmal said immediately. "Suspend him. Possibly throw him in the brig for a few days to think about why rules exist." "Can't throw him in the brig," Lix said, still watching her scanner. "The cubs are bonded to him now. Look at these readings. Their psionic signatures are synchronized with his biorhythms. If we separate them, their stress levels will spike immediately." "Then separate them slowly," Throckmal insisted. "Weaning process. Transfer them back to quarantine, increase distance over time." "We tried that with the Vexen bird last month," Lix reminded him. "It took 3 weeks, and the bird still attacks everyone except Hux." "That is not relevant." "It's extremely relevant. Sir, with respect, this human has a pattern." Oxaloth's light shifted to a curious green. "A pattern?" Lix pulled up her data tablet, scrolling through files. "Incident report. 5 weeks ago. Krillian serpent wrapped itself around Hux's arm during transport. Serpent is venomous, typically hostile to handlers. It stayed there for 3 hours and had to be coaxed off with food rewards. It seemed lonely, Hux protested. 8 weeks ago, Lix continued, territorial vexen Bird nested in his hair during quarantine cleaning. Bird is known for attacking faces. It groomed him instead. I have very comfortable hair. 11 weeks ago, juvenile megapredator from Ixion 6 followed him around the facility for an entire shift. Megapredators are solitary ambush hunters. This one followed him like a domestic pet. Throckmall's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. That is unusual. Unusual is generous, Lix said. I've been tracking incidents across the station for the past 6 months. Hux has a 98% success rate with aggressive or traumatized animals. The next highest handler is at 61%. The statistical anomaly is significant. Okay, but that's just because I pay attention to their body language, Hux said, shifting uncomfortably. And I, talk to them. Animals respond to tone, calm energy, that sort of thing. You talk to them, Uxaloth repeated. Yeah, I mean, they can't understand the words, but they understand the intent. You just have to be, genuine? Non-threatening? I don't know. It's not complicated. It is literally the most complicated aspect of xenophonic care, Uxaloth said. We have specialists who train for cycles to manage these creatures. We have enrichment programs, behavioral protocols, pharmaceutical interventions. And you're saying you just talk to them nicely. And give them snacks, Hux added. Snacks help. Throckmall looked at Uxaloth. I want it on record that I find this entire conversation deeply frustrating. Noted, Uxaloth said. However, we still have a practical problem. These cubs are in quarantine for 8 more days. Regulations state they cannot leave the nursery wing during that period. But according to Lix's readings, separating them from Hux will compromise their health. So unless someone has a brilliant solution, put him in quarantine with them, Lix suggested. Everyone turned to stare at her. Explain, Uxaloth said. Simple. Hux violated quarantine protocol by removing the cubs. Punishment? He's confined to the nursery wing for the remainder of the quarantine period. He's already there most of the day anyway, so it's not much of a change. The cubs stay with him, their health remains stable, and we satisfy the regulatory requirements. Technically. Throckmall's expression suggested he was experiencing physical pain from the logic. That is not how punishment is supposed to work. Do you have a better idea? Lix asked. Silence. Uxaloth's internal light pulsed through several colors before settling on resigned purple. Fine, Hux. You are hereby confined to the nursery wing for the next 8 days. You will not leave except for medical emergencies. You will continue your normal duties. And you will keep those cubs alive and healthy. Because if anything happens to them, I will personally crystallize you and use you as a paperweight. Understood? Yes, Commander, Hux said, looking genuinely surprised. So I'm not fired? Oh, you're absolutely being written up, Uxaloth said. There will be a formal reprimand in your file. But you're also apparently the only person on this station who can keep those cubs calm. So congratulations. You're now irreplaceable and in trouble simultaneously. Story of my life, Hux muttered. One of the cubs chirped sleepily, as if in agreement. Dr. Fixlow arrived at the nursery wing approximately 30 minutes after the incident had been resolved, which was both impressively fast and slightly concerning given that Medusians typically moved at a pace best described as contemplative drifting. The doctor materialized through the doorway as a floating mass of translucent, bioluminescent tendrils, their bell-shaped body pulsing with curious yellow light. They had 8 primary appendages for manipulation, dozens of sensory tendrils for data collection, and exactly 0 patience for inefficiency, which made them either the best or worst person to investigate the current situation, depending on who you asked. "I was told there was a medical emergency involving the Kethrian cubs," Dr. Fixelo said, their voice emanating from somewhere within their gelatinous form with that characteristic watery quality Medusians had. "I was not told the emergency consisted of them sleeping peacefully for the first time since rescue." Hux was sitting cross-legged on the floor of the nursery common area, the cubs now out of his pocket and sprawled across his lap in various states of unconsciousness. One had its paw draped over his knee. Another was using his thigh as a pillow. The third was curled against his stomach, purring like a tiny combustion engine. "Yeah, sorry about the confusion," Hux said, carefully not moving. "I think emergency might have been overselling it." "You think?" Dr. Fixlow drifted closer, their sensory tendrils extending toward the cubs, scanning. "Interesting. Heart rates are optimal. Respiratory function is excellent. Brain activity suggests REM sleep, which they have not achieved since intake. Stress hormone levels are—" The doctor paused, several tendrils twitching. "That cannot be correct." "What can't be correct?" Oxaloth asked. They'd followed the doctor in, along with Throckmall and Lix, apparently deciding that this situation required continued supervision. "These readings indicate the cubs are experiencing the lowest stress levels on record. Lower, in fact, than the baseline we established from cubs observed in their natural habitat before the species crisis." Dr. Fixelow's entire form rippled with confusion. How is this possible? They are orphaned, displaced, in an artificial environment, and yet their biochemistry suggests they feel safe? More than safe. Content. Almost happy. "It's the human," Lix said, gesturing at Hux with her tail. "We established that already." "Yes, but that raises more questions than it answers." Dr. Fixlow began circling Hux slowly, tendrils waving. "I need to review something. Give me a moment." The doctor produced a holographic display from somewhere within their bell. Medusian biology was mysterious like that, and began pulling up files. Video footage flickered into existence, floating in the air. "This is from 5 weeks ago," Dr. Fixelo narrated. "The Krillian serpent incident." The footage showed Hux in one of the transport corridors carrying a containment crate. The serpent, easily 2 meters long, scales glistening with toxic secretions, had somehow escaped and was coiled on the floor, hood flared in a threat display. Most species would have retreated immediately. Krillian serpents had venom that could drop a Earthanian in under a minute. In the video, Hux set down the crate and crouched, making himself smaller. He held out one hand, palm up, and started talking. The audio was muted, but his body language was relaxed, non-threatening. The serpent watched him for a long moment, tongue flicking, analyzing. Then, inexplicably, it lowered its hood and slithered forward, wrapping itself around Hux's offered arm. "It stayed there for 3 hours," Dr. Fixelo said. "Refused to leave. Security had to bribe it with food." "I remember that," Throckmall grumbled. "We thought it was a fluke." "Next incident." The footage changed. 8 weeks ago. The Vexon bird. This video showed Hux cleaning one of the habitats, the kind of routine maintenance that was boring right up until something decided to make it interesting. The Vexon bird, a territorial species with a beak designed for cracking armor plating, had been perched on a high branch, watching. In the footage, it suddenly launched itself at Hux's head. Throckmall tensed, remembering how that could have gone. Vexon birds went for eyes, soft tissue, anything vulnerable. But the bird didn't attack. It landed in Hux's hair. The human had a lot of it, dark and messy, and started grooming him. Its beak carefully worked through the strands, making soft clicking sounds. That bird still attacks every other handler on site, Lix noted. Hux has to be present for any habitat maintenance. And this, Dr. Fixolo said, pulling up a third video, 11 weeks ago. The mega-predator from Ixion 6 was, objectively speaking, terrifying. 3 meters tall at the shoulder, 6 legs, a mouth full of crystalline teeth that could chew through hull plating. It was an apex predator from a death world, and the only reason it was on the station was because its entire ecosystem was collapsing. In the video, it was following Hux through the nursery wing, just walking behind him like an oversized puppy. When Hux stopped to check on another habitat, the mega-predator sat. When Hux moved, it followed. At one point, Hux reached up to scratch behind one of its auditory ridges, and the creature made a sound that could only be described as pleased rumbling. This should not be possible, Dr. Fixolo said, freezing the image. Mega-predators are solitary. They do not bond. They do not follow. They hunt. They eat. They sleep. That is their entire behavioral repertoire. And yet, Uxaloth said quietly. And yet. Dr. Fixolo's tendrils writhed with academic frustration. So I asked the question that should have been asked weeks ago. What makes humans different? They are weak, Throckmall offered. Poor sensory capabilities, minimal natural defenses, fragile skeletal structure. They are adaptable, Lix countered. Tool users, problem solvers, high cognitive function. But not the highest, Uxloth pointed out. Collick's computational capacity exceeds human capacity by orders of magnitude. Yet animals do not respond to us this way. What about emotional intelligence? Lix suggested. Humans have highly developed social structures. Pack bonding is fundamental to their evolution. Dr. Fixolo's bell pulsed with interest. Go on. Humans evolved alongside other predators and prey species on their home world, Lix continued, pulling up her own data. They domesticated hundreds of species over thousands of generations. Canines, felines, various livestock, birds, even insects for agriculture. They formed symbiotic relationships with animals that other species would consider too dangerous or too resource-intensive. They kept apex predators as companions, Throckmall said slowly, understanding dawning, in their homes, with their offspring. Not just kept, Lix said, bonded with. Humans have this concept called pets, animals they keep for no practical purpose other than companionship. They feed them, shelter them, provide medical care, and, in return, the animals provide emotional support. It is an entirely non-transactional relationship based on mutual affection. That is irrational, Throckmall said. That is humanity, Lix replied. Dr. Fixolo was fully engaged now, tendrils flying across holographic displays, pulling up research. There are studies on this. Human biochemistry includes elevated oxytocin production, a bonding hormone. They release it when interacting with other humans, but also when interacting with animals. Their nervous systems are literally designed to create emotional connections across species boundaries. Plus, the persistence hunter thing, Hux added from the floor, apparently listening to the entire conversation. We're really good at not giving up. Everyone turned to look at him. Persistence hunter thing? Uxloth asked. Yeah, humans evolved as pursuit predators. We're not fast, we're not strong, but we're stubborn. We can track prey for days, weeks even, until it collapses from exhaustion. That mentality translates to other stuff. If an animal is scared or aggressive, we don't give up on it. We just keep trying, keep being patient, keep showing up. Until the animal either trusts you or dies of old age, Throckmall asked dryly. Pretty much, yeah. Dr. Fixelow's entire form shimmered. This is remarkable. You are describing a species-wide trait that makes you ideal for conservation work, and yet this is the first time I am hearing about it in clinical terms. I mean, it's not clinical, Hux said. It's just how we are. Most humans like animals. We see something cute or scared or hurt, and we want to help. It's instinct. Instinct, Dr. Fixelow repeated. Yes, that makes sense. Your body language, scent markers, vocal tones, they all communicate non-threat. Pack member rather than predator. And animals, especially young or traumatized ones, respond to those signals. One of the cubs stretched, yawned, and repositioned itself on Hux's lap without waking up. Its bioluminescent stripes flickered in a pattern that looked almost like contentment. So, what you are telling me, Uxaloth said, their light pulsing with resignation, is that humans are biologically optimized to befriend anything with a nervous system. And we just did not know this? To be fair, Hux said, we don't usually advertise it. Makes us sound like we're collecting species like trading cards. Are you not? Throckmall asked. I mean, okay, maybe a little, but it comes from a good place. Dr. Fixelow was already making notes, their tendrils moving rapidly. I need to publish this. The xenobiology community needs to understand human-animal interaction patterns. This could revolutionize conservation protocols across the galaxy. Great, Hux said. Can I be anonymous in the paper? I don't want to be famous for aggressive cuddling. Too late, Lick said, holding up her tablet. The security footage from this morning has already been flagged by 3 news agencies. Apparently, human steals endangered cubs, they love it, is a compelling headline. Oh no. Oh yes. Lix's expression might have been a smile. Hard to tell with Ophidians. You are about to become the poster child for human-animal relations. Can we focus on the immediate problem? Uxaloth interjected. We have 8 days of quarantine remaining. The cubs are healthy but bonded to Hux. What is the plan for gradual separation? Dr. Fixelow considered this. Ideally, we would slowly introduce distance over the quarantine period, reducing contact time until the cubs can self-regulate without human presence. However, they gestured at the sleeping cubs. Given their current attachment and trauma history, forced separation could trigger regression. They might stop eating, become aggressive, or withdraw completely. So we are trapped in this situation, Throckmall said. Temporarily, yes. And the human remains confined to the nursery? Unless you want screaming cubs broadcasting telepathic distress across the station, yes. Throckmall's mandibles clicked in defeat. I hate this so much. Noted, Uxaloth said. Doctor, monitor the cubs closely. I want daily reports on their progress. Hux, you will continue your duties, but you are not to remove any other animals from their habitats without explicit authorization. Is that clear? Crystal, Hux said, then winced. Sorry, Commander, no species-based puns intended. Just stop talking, Uxaloth said, their light flickering with exhaustion. Everyone, dismissed. I need to file approximately 800 incident reports, and I would like to do so before I lose what remains of my sanity. The group began dispersing, but Dr. Fixelow lingered, watching Hux and the cubs with scientific fascination. You know, they said thoughtfully, in all my cycles of xenobiology research, I have never seen anything quite like this. You are an anomaly, Hux. A beautiful, frustrating, regulatory nightmare of an anomaly. Thanks, Hux said. I think. It is a compliment. Mostly. Dr. Fixlow drifted toward the door, then paused. Take care of them. They need you more than they should, which is concerning from a professional standpoint, but rather touching from a personal one. Will do, Doc. The doctor left, and Hux was finally alone with the cubs. Well, not entirely alone. Security. Cameras were definitely watching, and he'd bet good credits that Throckmall was monitoring every feed. But alone enough. One of the cubs opened its eyes, blinked up at him, and chirped softly. Yeah, buddy, Hux said quietly. I know. This is weird for me, too. The cub closed its eyes and went back to sleep, purring. Hux leaned his head back against the wall and sighed. 8 days of quarantine. 8 days of being watched constantly. 8 days of being responsible for 3 of the rarest creatures in the known universe. 8 days of explaining to everyone who asked that, no, he did not have any special powers. He was just nice to animals, and apparently that was revolutionary. Typical Thursday. Well, not Thursday. He had lost track of what day it was. Typical someday. The cubs purred in harmony, and despite everything, the confinement, the scrutiny, the absolute certainty that this would follow him for the rest of his career, Hux smiled. Worth it. 3 days into quarantine confinement, something unexpected happened. Well, more unexpected than usual, which was saying something given the week Hux was having. The cubs were doing their morning routine, which consisted of waking up, demanding food, climbing all over Hux like he was landscape, and then napping again, when their purring shifted. Instead of the random individual rumbles they usually made, the 3 of them synchronized, creating a harmonic frequency that made the air in the nursery vibrate slightly. Dr. Fixlow, who had taken to camping out in the nursery for research purposes, immediately perked up, tendrils going rigid. That pattern. I know that pattern. Is it bad? Hux asked, trying not to move while one cub used his shoulder as a launching pad to reach a higher shelf. No, it is a territorial broadcast. Safe territory. The cubs are telling other animals that this space is secure. Dr. Fixlow's entire form shimmered with excitement. They feel safe enough to claim this area as home. That's good, right? That is exceptional. What happened next was even more exceptional, though nobody realized it immediately. The Krillian serpent in Habitat 6, which had refused food for 4 days straight, suddenly emerged from its hiding spot and ate. The Vexen bird stopped its aggressive territorial displays. The megapredator from Ixion 6, which had been pacing anxiously for weeks, laid down and slept for the first time since arriving. One by one, across the entire nursery wing, traumatized animals started recovering. This is impossible, Dr. Fixlow said, reviewing the medical readouts. Simultaneous behavioral improvement across 15 different species? There is no medical explanation. The cubs, Lick said quietly, monitoring the psionic frequencies. Their broadcast is reaching the other animals. It is a cascading effect. One signal of safety, triggering relaxation responses in everything else. Throckmall, who had been watching all this unfold with increasing resignation, finally spoke. So you are telling me that 3 cubs sleeping in a human's hoodie have accomplished what our entire medical and enrichment staff could not? Yes, Dr. Fixlow said simply. I hate this timeline, Throckmall muttered. The story reached Galactic News Network by day 5. Not the official report. Oxaloth had tried very hard to bury that under regulatory paperwork, but someone on the station had leaked the security footage, and Human Breaks Protocol, saves endangered species with nap, was apparently the feel-good story the galaxy desperately needed. The footage showed Hux asleep on the couch, cubs in his pocket, and somehow, despite being a clear violation of approximately 24 regulations, it made people happy. Comments sections across the galactic net filled with variations of course the human did that, and why are humans like this, and I want to hug a human now. Oxaloth watched the view counter climb into the millions and made a sound that crystalline beings probably should not make. We are going to be inspected, audited, reviewed by every regulatory body in the Union. Or, Lix suggested, pulling up another screen, we could use this. Use this how? The Galactic Conservation Council has been denying our funding requests for 3 cycles. They say conservation stations are not cost-effective, that resources should go elsewhere. But this, she gestured at the viral footage, this is proof that what we do matters, and that humans are exceptionally good at it. Oxaloth's internal light flickered through several colors before settling on thoughtful green. You want to use a quarantine violation as leverage for funding? I want to use positive public sentiment as leverage for funding, Lix corrected. The violation is unfortunate. The outcome is remarkable. We present it correctly. And suddenly, we are not the station that broke rules. We are the station that prioritized animal welfare over bureaucracy. That is actually brilliant. I have my moments. By day 8, when quarantine officially ended, the cubs were healthy, confident, and significantly larger. They could self-regulate their temperature, eat independently, and had stopped broadcasting distress signals entirely. Dr. Fixolo declared them ready for the next phase of rehabilitation, gradual reintroduction to species-specific behaviors in preparation for eventual habitat restoration. They still preferred sleeping in Hux's hoodie, but that was, as Dr. Fixolo noted in the official report, a minor psychological dependency that will resolve with appropriate behavioral modification protocols. Spoiler: it did not resolve. The Galactic Conservation Council not only approved Pinnacle Haven's funding request, they tripled it. The viral footage had generated so much positive attention that conservation donations across the galaxy increased by 18%. Other stations started requesting human staff, specifically for their wildlife programs. Throckmall started a betting pool on what species Hux would accidentally befriend next. Current odds favored either a toxic sludge creature from the peripheral systems or something with too many teeth. Oxaloth stopped trying to prevent the inevitable and instead created a new protocol, Human-Animal Interaction Guidelines, which was essentially a list of rules Hux would absolutely ignore, but at least they could say they tried. And Hux went back to his regular duties, the cubs following him around the nursery like imprinted ducklings, his hoodie pocket perpetually occupied by something small and endangered. When asked by reporters how he felt about becoming the face of human-animal relations, he shrugged and said, "I just think most things are better with kindness and snacks," which was, in its own way, the most human response possible. The cubs chirped in agreement. Somewhere in the galaxy, another human was probably befriending something they should not befriend, solving problems with methods that made no sense, and accidentally revolutionizing entire fields of study through sheer stubborn compassion. Humanity's greatest weapon was not technology, not strength, not even intelligence. It was the baffling, inexplicable, absolutely unshakable belief that most problems could be solved with patience, warmth, and the willingness to take a nap with something dangerous. And somehow, impossibly, infuriatingly, it kept working.